Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining me for today's extremely important meeting. Normally, this time of year, I do State of the School, but I think all would agree this is not a normal time. Since March, our lives were upended by a pandemic, and I've been and will continue to communicate on a regular basis as we continue to adjust to a changing landscape. There are also often many things to celebrate at this time of year, and there are things to celebrate this year as well, and I'll continue to communicate those to you. However, I've decided to pivot the previously scheduled State of the School and use this time to discuss what is the most pressing issue of our time, rocking our nation. The painful reality of racism across our nation, be it individual, systemic, or institutional. But what we will discuss today is our own institutional racism. Just so you know, participants in today's session can submit questions or comments by the question and answer button. But unfortunately, due to the volume of attendees and our desire to honor everybody's time, we won't be able to address them real time. But be assured we'll collect, review, and incorporate the input we receive into the questions that will inform our plans going forward. As a leading academic institution with our stated core values, whether it's the university, the School of Medicine, or Duke Health, we speak of diversity, respect, and inclusion. However, we will not live up to those values without looking within our own house and actively eliminating systemic and institutional racism. It is not good enough to denounce racism. We must actively become anti-racist. Furthermore, it is our responsibility to bring the power of our core missions to eliminate the injustices and inequities in our community. I can think of nothing more important to talk about at this moment than our need to acknowledge and to take the essential steps to dismantle any structural racism within our institution. And when we do that, we can become powerful, credible champions of change outside the walls of Duke. We have all seen our communities and nation unravel in the past few weeks, overcome with grief and anger over the deeply disturbing killing of George Floyd, a shocking demonstration of police brutality and racism, preceded by the deeply disturbing killing of Ahmaud Arbery against a racist act, the killing of Breonna Taylor, a brutal police tactic and racism, and just this weekend, the killing of Rayshard Brooks, and there are countless other members of the Black community. We have experienced the upheaval of life by the COVID pandemic, where morbidity and mortality is disproportionately affecting minority communities. And this is just the last few months. So I want to be clear, racism, like COVID, is a public health crisis, and they are intertwined. And as an academic medical center, these are our issues. Before proceeding further, I want to invite you to join me in a moment of silence to pause and honor the lives of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and Rayshard Brooks, as well as all those who have lost their lives at the hands of hatred and injustice, police brutality, and all those who have been most impacted by long and ongoing racial violence. Let us take a moment of silence. I have been heartened in this incredibly difficult time by all of you who have come out so strongly across Duke to show your commitment to change. Over 600 people from across campus joined us in a communal 8 minutes and 46-second pause to remember George Floyd with the university flag flown at half-mast. Another collective effort occurred with over 1,000 people coming together at the Duke Health Solidarity Walk, another powerful example of coming together for justice. And many of you participated in the Shut Down STEM national effort to support healing for Black colleagues and an opportunity for reflection and education. And just today, many of you are joining us from the Living While Black forum on campus, which gave us a sense of the enormous expertise we have to learn from and the renewed commitment of our partners on campus. I'm inspired by the collective stand for justice and so many other moments unfolding. But we have to be sure to stay the course and continue to engage and take action. So my talk is a call to action. We need the same focus and determination with racism that we have given to COVID. And it is understandable that many, having experienced fleeting moments of focus in the past, are less than optimistic that outcomes will be different. We are after tangible, sustainable change, and that will require planning and hardwiring processes at levels we have not done before. What we are talking about today and will be examining going forward is racism. It is a root cause of so many other challenges we talk about. The lack of diversity and inclusion, healthcare injustices and disparities and biases. To frame it in another way, diversity, inclusion, equity are important symptoms when they don't go well, and treatment when they go well for the underlying disease of racism. The School of Medicine will pledge to reject racism in all of its forms and the injustices associated with it. We'll work to dismantle institutional racism by addressing the ways we have been complicit in perpetuating, irrespective of our intent, and pledge the power of our missions to correct the underlying forces at the root of these injustices. This will be done with a committed partnership with our department, institute, center, and institutional leaders across our school, campus, and Duke Health, many of which have sent me strong statements and plans already in the works. This will be a top priority. So here's our agenda today. First, to address why now. Then where we are now currently, at least in terms of what our data and our narratives tell us. We will hear voices from our community and start to plan our way forward. So why now? Why is this important? Well, it really is a confluence of events, the national events that have been so jarring and relentless, and although not new, have galvanized a national protest and focus on racism and human rights. And this focus goes beyond racism in policing. It's COVID and its disparate impact on Black and Brown communities. It's the experiences and voices of our own students, faculty, and staff. They have given me a sense of urgency and obligation to address structural racism in our own institution. For me personally, hearing and seeing and reading the deep personal pain, distress, and despondency of members of our own community has been troubling and heartbreaking. I've heard the personal narratives of those willing to share in the listening sessions as they tell incidences and experiences here at Duke that do not support the commitment to the values we espouse. Many of those narratives in the past were in the form of personal anecdotes written into many surveys, but unfortunately too easy to dismiss as one-offs. These are not one-offs, but rather signals, similar to what is being seen across our nation in so many parts of our society, that they point to a root cause of structural racism. I'm particularly grateful to our students for their willingness to share their thoughts in the midst of this immense pain. Our Student National Medical Association students have given me a clear, thoughtful, and detailed document that has action items that will serve as a guide in our examination of our education mission and experience. We must do better for our students. They are for the better future, not only for Duke, but for the healthcare in this country. The narratives from our students, our listening sessions, and embedded in our surveys tell me that our Black and Brown colleagues at Duke have experienced silencing, invisibility, disrespect, and exclusion. They have endured and witnessed disturbing health disparities that share a common root in racism. It is time to take action. The AAMC statement is a powerful statement coming from our national organization, and I urge all of you to read the full statement. It's an indicator of the national backing of this work and the alignment across all of our academic medical schools. It is our call to action to look within all institutions to eliminate the inequities in our care, in our research, and in our education for tomorrow's doctors and scientists. So where are we now? Let's look at some data, but more importantly, let's hear some voices. So some of our own key data will help inform and guide efforts going forward. Diversity is not a root cause, but rather an indicator of potential racism. I believe it is a mark of excellence. It is how we arrive at the best solutions to complex problems, the diversity bonus. It is how we arrive at being the true excellence in our missions of research, education, and patient care. It reflects our values and commitments. Our success is mixed and should inform us going forward. We are proud of the fact that over 20 years, underrepresented students in our School of Medicine, year over year, have exceeded the national percentage and has been associated with the rising quality and reputation of the school. This is due in large part to the visionary leadership and tenacity of Dr. Brenda Armstrong, beginning in the mid-1990s. But what we did learn from Brenda is it's not easy to have such a sustained change. It takes hard work, persistence, innovation, and determination, and a willingness to do things differently. But the fruits of that work clearly have equated with excellence, and we cannot lose sight of what it will take to maintain that excellence. We have had more modest success in our biomedical science students. However, faculty tell a very different story, as does diversity of leadership. We have had a very slight uptick in the number of Black and Hispanic identifying faculty, yet their overall representation among the entire faculty has not changed meaningfully in years. Currently, 4.3% of regular rank faculty are Black and 3.3% identify as Hispanic. Growth in diverse representation is a lagging indicator of an enhanced culture of inclusion, belonging, and engagement, and drives growth in and success of the diversity of our learners, faculty, and staff. The absence of diversity speaks volumes and creates a real vacuum of mentors, role models, and thought leaders. We need to examine why we have not had more success, and yes, examine the root cause, and then address how we change going forward. But more motivating than the data are the voices from our faculty, staff, students. The 2018 AAMC Diversity Engagement Survey provides signals of the climate of our institution. There are over 3,800 who filled out our survey and over 1,700 comments associated with the survey from faculty, staff, and learners. 30% of the comments mentioned issues of race, racism, microaggression, and other concerns about race equity. But it's more telling to read the comments. A prospective resident noted that an educator spent an hour telling the student why only Black and Hispanic residents and medical students struggled at Duke, and how it's an academic malpractice to accept them into the elite institutions. Another student talked of people that don't believe that there's inequality and daily microaggressions, that they're not a reality for our students here at Duke. And then from a staff perspective, doctors, especially upper management, do not look at you or speak to you when passing on the elevators. More student voices talked of few minority mentors, and I hear this over and over and over again, whether our students are in the classroom or the clinics. As a student perspective, as a minority, I know I filled a void in the class. And a staff perspective, I am almost always the only person who looks like me at meetings. From another resident perspective, the institution revolves around ideas of old, white, straight men. I belong to 3 of those groups and still feel this way. And a diversity of ideas is needed at a place like Duke, and I believe that personally, wholeheartedly, but this is not what we see at Duke. So now I'd like to have you hear from our own students and leaders who have voices and stories to share. The first is Kirsten Simmons. Kirsten is a 4th-year medical student and also completing a Master's of Theologic Studies in the Divinity School. She is co-president of the Duke's SNMA chapter, and she recently authored a paper, "My White Coat Feels So Heavy." I encourage all of you to read it. I have several times. So I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, like Dean Klotman said, I'm Kirsten, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to share some heartfelt remarks with you. Right now, resting in the National Museum of African American History is a picture. You may glimpse past it if you're not reading too carefully, but it shows a group of people who are marching on the state capitol in Columbia, South Carolina in 1961. This was a march that was organized by the NAACP, as well as some local churches, and they were crying out against segregation and the treatment of African Americans. One of those individuals who's there in a pleated jacket is my own grandmother who's crying out. And I printed this picture, and that added a little to the weight of my white coat recently. My grandmother has informed me that during this time they would meet at the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, to organize their protests, their marches, and their calls of action. Emmanuel Church, or Mother Emmanuel, as many people know, may be familiar to some of you. It is not only the oldest AME church that was founded in the South in 1817, but it may be familiar to you because on the evening of June 17, 2015, a white supremacist by the name of Dylan Ruth marched in there, sat in on a prayer meeting, and murdered 9 of those church members. Tomorrow will mark its 5th anniversary. In Charleston, you could not sit and eat. You could not order your food, you had to stand on the side of the restaurant, order your food, wait for it to be delivered to you, and leave its premises. It was much like the social distancing practices and precautions that we take, but it wasn't out of safety precautions, and it wasn't out of evidence-based medicine. It was out of racism, widespread ignorance, illegitimate fear, and perpetual evil against the Black body and the Black soul. And so she would tell me that on several occasions, she would say, Kirsten, we would march, and we would sing our hymns, and we would march. And there were times when we would get sprayed with the water hoses, and the police dogs would chase us, and we would hide in the alleyways. But she said that it was worth it. And on nights where she would find herself in jail next to her twin brother, she said that even though they were jailed for disturbing the peace, it was worth it because they were defending their worth, defending their dignity, and hopefully making a change for their children and their children's children. She would even joke and say, Kirsten, we would play baseball with the hard biscuits that they would serve us in jail. So I've called on her the past couple of weeks because I've found myself hurt, angry, frustrated, anxious, and hopeless at these senseless killings that have happened in our community. Putting on the white coat has felt heavy. My grandmother has continued to pray for me. I call her often. She continues to tell me these stories and fill me with faith and hope that speaking out, writing, and talking with administrators in a passionate and fierce way is the right thing to do. The public statements that have highlighted the experience of Black medical students at this institution has been disheartening. My peers, many whom are a part of SMA, have been told that their Blackness is the only reason for their success. They have been dismissed in hospitals, in the clinical setting, especially when they are not wearing a white coat. They have been critiqued harder and received worse subjective feedback by clinical faculty and people on the staff than their non-minority classmates. They have been confused for janitorial staff at first glance. They have been called one of the good Blacks. They have been left out of AOA nominations and elections. They have been told to go into primary care if they really want to help their people. They have been told that Black Lives Matter is a political issue. They have been singled out in classrooms. They have been invited to the front of the classroom to take a pulmonary function tests to defend or disprove the fact that Black people have lower lung volumes. Among all of these, one can imagine just how hurtful it has been. But Black students have internalized these sayings. They have internalized these actions. They are hurt. Many are not in a position where they can consistently thrive, and we are in need of change. I want to say, along with Austin Maduka, that it has been a pleasure to serve as one of the co-presidents of SNMA, where we have been able to build an environment that has sought to validate everyone in our group and empower them and celebrate them every chance that we get. To all of you who are part of SNMA and the minority members who are part of this community, I'm just so excited about you, about where you're going. And I am here to celebrate you, your personhood, your joyous and unfortunate histories, and your determination to learn. And I know that you will be an awesome group of doctors. I want to make clear in a moment of honesty that by advocacy and what I have said and the actions, that I could be putting my career on the line. Much of what we have written and said, it may jeopardize future placement at institutions and those who may not be ready to change a 401 plus documented history of oppression. But it's worth it because our dignity is worth it and our value is worth it. I, like many of you, have sown good seeds into Duke's fertile soil, and I want it to grow and I want it to flourish. And so I hope that as we go into our homes and our labs and our classrooms and our faculty meetings and our operating rooms and our patient rooms and in front of our students, that we not just survey these inequalities, but that we find ways that we can change policy and increase funding to undo so many years of wrongdoing. I believe that in the same way Duke boasts and celebrates in its academic and research success, that we could do the same thing and be a frontier institution in showing the world what dismantling systems of inequalities really looks like. My grandmother is counting on me to better the world around me. It's the payment that I pay every day for living here. And I hope that with the work of Dean Klotman, Chancellor Washington, and all of the School of Medicine administrators and faculties, that we will do this together. I want to thank you, Dean Klotman, again for the opportunity to speak. I walk alongside you, and I'm so optimistic for change and have faith that we will do better. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirsten, and thank you to Austin and all your fellow students who have been willing to share in a time that is incredibly painful for our students. So I so appreciate it, but more importantly, we have heard you, and we have a lot to work on. So our next speaker is Andrew Spector, Vice Chair of Inclusion, Diversity, Engagement for the Department of Neurology and Associate Professor of Neurology. Andrew?
Thank you, Dean Klotman. Good afternoon. I really am truly honored to be asked to speak today. As Dean Klotman said, my name is Andrew Spector, and I'm the Vice Chair for Inclusion, Diversity, and Empowerment in the Department of Neurology. In my work for the department, I don't usually speak about my interracial marriage. While my wife's experiences as a Black physician scientist inform a lot of my work, I intentionally keep my family separate because the work isn't about us, it's about all the members of the department. But today I'm going to speak about how racism affects our family. It's important that you know that I have permission to share these stories. Let me start by telling you that the last 2 weeks have been especially hard. There have been tears and screams and rage. Let me tell you, it's hard to watch your wife suffer from an existential crisis. Her words. How is she supposed to focus on everything she needs to do when all she can really think about is whether her kids will come home safely after playing in the neighborhood? How is she supposed to function in a society that bombards her with the message that her life doesn't matter? And for those of you who think it's ridiculous for her to worry because the odds of something tragic actually happening are so small, she knows that. She understands math. The fear comes from powerlessness. The fear comes from knowing that no matter how much money we make, no matter what schools we send our kids to, no matter what race their father happens to be, we cannot create a world where the color of their skin doesn't put them and her at risk. But our kids are still small, so our fear for them is mostly directed toward the future. On the other hand, my wife's brother is an adult black man living in a big city. A few years ago, he was pulled over by not one, but 4 police cars. The police exited their vehicles with guns already drawn and pointed at his head. What did he do to deserve this, he managed to ask. The lead officer told him he was stopped because he was putting the hood of his hoodie on and taking it off again while driving. I'm not making that up. They demanded to see what was in the book bag that they saw him retrieve from his trunk. When they learned the book bag contained, you guessed it, books, they disappointedly walked back to their cars and drove off without a word. No apology. How many stories like this do you think it takes for my wife to live in fear that her brother will be the next George Floyd or Freddie Gray or Rayshard Brooks? What makes this so much scarier is the randomness. How do you cope when this could happen to you or your loved ones any day of the week with nothing you can do to prevent it? I have a son who's now 6 years old. At age 2, he told me that he didn't want to have black skin because white was better. Age 2. Let that sink in. If you ever doubt how pervasive racism is, remember my 2-year-old figured that out. I know nothing I've just said is new to any of the black people watching this. This is everyday life for you. For others of you, though, you might just now be recognizing the scope of the problem we face in this country. Many of you want to take action. That's progress. That means you're ready to start working toward anti-racism. Anti-racism is when you realize that simply not being racist yourself isn't good enough anymore, and you begin to act against racism. There are 2 things you'll need to start doing this. Number 1 is courage. You need courage for introspection. It's cliche, but change really does start from within. If you don't assess yourself, you can't begin to help others. And you need courage because you're going to be joining a fight against an entrenched, centuries-old problem defended by people who are highly motivated to maintain the status quo, some who would even die to do so. The second thing you need is education. You have to know the history to understand the present. You might be wondering what I've been saying to my wife to console her lately. And I tell her that no matter how bad things seem, I have hope for the future. I have hope because we are having this conversation today. Can you imagine this 20 years ago? It's progress that the deaths of black people at the hands of white people have sparked massive outrage. It used to go unnoticed, or worse, in some places, it was celebrated. We used to have eyewitness accounts, but now we have videos to hold people accountable for their actions. This too is progress. This progress is not enough, and it's really hard to tell someone to be patient and that things will get better in time. It's 2020 and black people are still literally dying in the streets of our country. So let's start to act. Let's start with our own School of Medicine and look at all the ways racism has been baked into the very foundation of our school and medical education in general. Let's start there and rebuild Duke as the first truly anti-racist medical school in the country. Let's accept nothing less of ourselves. Thank you. Dean Klotman?
Thank you, Andrew. You summarized exactly what we want to do. I know it's a lofty goal, but we're taking it on. Our next speaker is Jonna Frierson. Jonna is our Assistant Dean of Graduate and Postdoctoral Diversity and Inclusion. Jonna?
Good afternoon. I also want to say thank you for the platform today. And it's really a pleasure for me to be able to speak for the constituents that I work so closely with, the graduate students and postdocs in the School of Medicine. Being a Black woman is a very important part of my identity, as well as being a scientist, so I want to start there. As a PhD student, my research focused on examining and understanding the critical interactions that take place when a virus attaches to a cell and infects it. Viruses use a staggering array of tools to ensure their continued replication and survival in the host. Some viruses, in their clever ways to escape being cleared from the body, even form reservoirs or sites in the body in which they can continue to accumulate and persist, almost undetected. Does it sound familiar? I pose to you today that our institution, School of Medicine, and all of our members of our academic community are hosts for the virus that is systemic and structural racism. It takes the active form of statements of outright ignorance and prejudice, and the latent but equally as harmful form of the policies and procedures that invisibly create barriers to entry and success. The specific targets: Black and brown students, faculty, postdocs, and staff who are fighting this virus every day, fighting just to pursue their passion for science, make meaningful contributions, and somehow maintain a sense of self and confidence in an environment that was not built with us in mind. If I had to sum up the experience of being Black in STEM from my own and the experiences of countless other students and postdocs I've supported over the years, it would be very simple. You can feel as though your presence is painfully conspicuous while simultaneously feeling that your needs, challenges, multiple dimensions, talent, and potential are woefully invisible from the micro to the macro level. I've dedicated my career to standing in the gap for Black and brown scientists and others who feel they don't belong, encouraging, advising, uplifting them while working to identify and remove barriers to access of opportunities, equity in their environment, and success in their chosen fields. Based on this experience and examination, my work and now my office, the Ideals Office, operates under 4 pillars, each identified to address the persistent gaps in our collective approaches to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Number 1, consistency. Do what you say you're going to do. Have a plan to sustain those efforts thoughtfully and communicate transparently about what the plan is. Number 2, belonging. Recognize and acknowledge that environment impacts performance. Cultivating an environment where people truly feel value for their ideas and unique perspective is the key, not a secondary or tertiary factor. Happy hours and social events are not enough. Acknowledge the work of Black scientists and respect their voice. Number 3, infrastructure. Think strategically, not reactively, about the people, organizational, financial, and procedural requirements for our efforts to be successful. We need to elevate these values to the same level as our core training mission because equity lays the foundation for everything else to succeed or fail. Number 4, accountability. Ask, who is responsible? What are the goals? Are we investing the time and effort and financial support needed for the goals to be met? And what are the alternative approaches and plans, as well as consequences, if the goals are not met? Consistency, belonging, infrastructure, and accountability. These are the components to our work to combat the virus of prejudice, racism, and discrimination in our institution. Let's use this moment to continue this work even more diligently and urgently moving forward. I look forward to working with each and every one of you through the platform of my office and my role, and thank you for the time today.
Thank you, John. I love the analogy with an infectious disease, but more importantly, the work that you've put into setting up Ideals Office will really be one of the models that will inform us going forward. So thank you so much. And now Kenny Raley. Kenny is the medical director of the Duke Physician Assistant Program. He's assistant professor in family medicine and community health, assistant professor in neurology, assistant chief diversity officer for the School of Medicine, and course director. And frankly, was really the energy around the standing up of the course, Cultural Determinants of Health and Health Disparities. So Kenny?
Thank you, Dean Klotman. Good evening, colleagues, community members, students, residents, fellows, and friends. I want to first start by thanking my fathers and my forebearers, both heavenly and earthly. And it is in their spirit and sacrifice that I greet you over Zoom this evening. Thank you, Dr. Klotman, for the opportunity to speak here tonight. Thank you, Kirsten, Tajana, and Andrew. I feel honored to share the virtual stage with you during such a critical time. Special thanks to Maureen Cullens, Kevin Thomas, Judy Seidenstein, and Kimberly Johnson for their encouragement. So when I was a younger man, I am certain I had something interesting about myself worth sharing, but now that I'm a little older, I fully own that the most interesting things about myself are my children. I'm that guy, cell phone pictures or video at the ready, eager to introduce you to the best parts of me that aren't me. Uh, and when I was growing up, there were two things I always wanted to be, a doctor and a dad. So I stand here proud to say that I'm both. And in traditional proud dad fashion, I want to introduce you to one of my children that'll set the backdrop for my brief time with you. And by the way, Dr. Klotman, my time doesn't start until I finish the introduction. If you didn't know, I have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl.
You're making me laugh.
Caleb, Keaton, and Chloe. Each one of them unique, special, and each one of them challenges me. And while my boys will always be my boys, there is nothing in the world deeper than a daughter's love. At the same time, while her love is deep and wide and unconditional, I suspect that before my time is done, it will be her that challenges me the most and likely provides me with the most lessons. She's only 5, but I think she's going on 30. And if I had to guess, this girl has been here before. Please don't tell her that I'm talking about her. About a week ago, Chloe came to me, Chloe Jeanette, my baby girl. She decided she was gonna make her dad something. So while the other 2 were off, no doubt, banging rocks together or seeing who could pass gas the loudest, I noticed it had become too quiet. You know that quiet I'm talking about if you have little ones, right before a commotion or a crash. In fact, normally by now, Chloe would have been in an altercation with one of her brothers, but she had disappeared. And to my surprise, no crash, no commotion. Here was Chloe, who reemerged holding a structure. I couldn't tell what she had created. There was a combination of strips of paper stretched together with some circular structure held together by some rough tape. And I said, Chloe, what did you make me? And she said with a wry smile, well, come on, Dad. You don't know? It's obviously a hat. Recognizing my mistake, and as any loved one of young children will do, I swooped up the structure, attempted to put it on my head, and informed her that it was the best hat I had ever had. The story didn't end there because truthfully, while I was putting the concocted monstrosity on my cranium, I was simultaneously considering which well-hidden drawer of school projects, stick people drawings, glue trinkets, and paper mache animals that I would shove this totally unusable creation in. I asked her gingerly, well, Chloe, I was wondering if you wanted me to keep this in my room or maybe keep it in yours? And she made a face I wouldn't forget. And before her wrath set upon me, I realized my mistake, modified my tone, snatched the hat back, and said, I got this, Chloe. I'll keep it right by my bed. Crisis averted. And there wasn't much more to say about it until a little later when Chloe and her brother did eventually do what I expected. And this verbal exchange ended with Chloe being put in timeout, unceremoniously ushered to her room. Now, my little one is known for her temper tantrums, a sharp tongue, and not backing down from a fight. It's possibly genetic. I said possibly. So after an appropriate amount of cool down, I returned to the room to talk it out. Yet when I entered her room to release her from her confinement, I noticed the very hat I had heretofore seen. Not only was it in her room, but it was in the trash by her bed. So I reached down into the receptacle, retrieved it, and my finely honed skills of deduction told me that this hat looked like it had been maybe stomped and crumbled before it was discarded. So I said, Chloe, what happened to Daddy's hat? And with tears gripping the edges of a red-faced cheeks that could melt the most steel-caged heart, she said, Daddy, I knew you didn't want my hat when you asked if I could keep it in my room. I know you don't care about me and you don't care about my hat, so I threw it away. Okay, so now my 4 minutes are officially starting. So what does my little girl have to do with racism? Well, if you know a little bit about my family history, my dad is a family doctor like me. My dad has 3 children like me. My dad was a single father like me. He's also an assistant dean of multicultural affairs at my alma mater, St. Louis University School of Medicine. So we both do diversity work as Black men. And needless to say, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. So we're partly here tonight tackling tough issues because of what more than a few might say are some bad apples. But I would posit rather than a few bad apples, what we have is the bearing of strange fruit of a country rooted in racism. The brutality that killed George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Rashard Brooks, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, John Crawford, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, that brutality caused by direct action or direct inaction. That brutality is a branch of a tree that has been firmly and seemingly forever planted. It is that tree that I hope to illuminate with my daughter's story. So I've got 3 parts I have to tell you about. So the 3 parts of that tree is a failure, faith, and fidelity. So let me explain as I move quickly to my point. Let's start with failure. We're in a pivotal moment in the School of Medicine, as a nation, as a planet, because of a failure to match our words with our actions. If you recall, I told Chloe that her hat was the best hat I had ever seen, but my action was to put it away. In fact, give it back to her. Her 5-year-old brain understood that if you like something, you wear it. And if you use it, its utility is wrapped in its value. Dad, you have a hat, you have a head, you put the hat on. So it's the same for your department. You say you want diversity and inclusion. You say that diversity makes you better. You've got a statement. So why is the evidence of that back on the shelf, or better yet, in the trash? Why don't you actually have diversity and inclusion for Black and brown people? Quite simply, it's the same reason why we haven't had any progress, because our actions don't match our words. How do I know nationally? Well, turn on the news. Look at children in cages, fathers murdered, mosques, temples, churches attacked. How do I know at Duke? Well, read the statements from the SNMA or the DPT program. Look around in your divisions with no Black or brown faculty. Look in the rooms at the C-suite level and see that it's filled with white men. Check out the makeup of your task force, your board, your executive team. They are as absent of Black and brown faces as the bias trainings are of white ones. We live in a city that's 50% Black and Latino or Hispanic. And if you add my non-white, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Indian, Vietnamese, Native American, and Filipino brothers and sisters, that number is 60%. But our leadership is 75%. What? My daughter understood the disconnect between actions and words just as you should. I failed to be an honest, caring, empathetic dad in that moment, and I threw her treasure in the trash. And part of the fix is acknowledging it. Every mental or behavioral health-oriented provider listening understands that you can't fix a problem you don't admit you have. So if our goal is to change from moment to movement, then leaders, board members, chancellors, deans, chairs, chiefs, program directors, it's your duty to acknowledge your failure and accept the reality that we can't be innocent bystanders anymore. Rather, let's be honest and call ourselves complicit bystanders. I challenge you to put your money where your mission is, despite financial cuts. Fund faculty and staff in diversity and equity work that have dedicated their free time to fix your failures. Fill your faculty, staff, and student rosters with people focused on feelings instead of finances. Fix your leadership task force so it includes people from the community and experience with disparities and facilitates a focus on the things that are in our value statement. So my next F is faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. In the simplest terms, faith is about believing. Fundamentally, people of color are just not believed. Whether provider, patient, peer, or personnel, it seems like we're constantly having to prove what we're seeing is what we're seeing. If you want to make this more than a moment, start by listening, then believe, then reflect. Non-people of color have to admit and commit to having faith in us. Don't minimize when we tell you something was discriminatory. Validate us. Just a few days ago, my 7-year-old son was fearful of me going to the bathroom because he saw a police officer in the restaurant we sat in. It's true, I didn't make it up. We aren't just playing the race card. And just as an aside, regarding the race card, I can't remember a time when that has ever worked. I'd sure like some better service. Here, take my race card. Can you make sure my vote is counted? Take my race card. I don't speak for all Black people, but I spend more time trying not to play the race card than playing it. So don't roll your eyes. Don't discount when things happen. Don't say I'm not a racist. He didn't mean it like that. Being poor is just as bad as being Black. So when I'm talking about faith, I'm asking you to believe us. We're your brothers, your sisters. We're essential to the hospital and to the planet. Have faith in us, right? We're essential to the very buildings you navigate. The architecture was built by us. If I was your sister who was told her name was ghetto or hood by a resident and it impacted her ability to perform on a rotation, would you believe her? If it was your illiterate father who says he was discharged from the hospital with no follow-up appointment, no paperwork, and a stack of materials, would you believe him? If it was your Black mother who was passed over again and over again for promotion, would you believe her? My daughter was disappointed because I didn't believe that it was the best hat. To me, her hat was disposable. It didn't take her long to discern it and subsequently be devastated by it. So hear us, feel us, believe us. Faith stands firm in a foundation of hope, fixated in connection and fueled by empathy. So my last F is fidelity. Fidelity is about constancy, loyalty. Thinking back to my daughter, I let her down because on some level I didn't stick with her. Much like matching actions with words, I wasn't consistent, I wasn't constant. The Duke School of Medicine has to be. We deserve fidelity. When the listening sessions end, when the symposiums are over, when the messages from leaders go away, will there be fidelity? So here's the hat that my daughter made, okay? So when I first put it on, it wasn't very comfortable. It was small and lopsided, scratched my head, but wearing it was a symbolic of listening and love that is without rival on this earth. I submit that unearthing the roots of racism operating right now in the Duke School of Medicine will be uncomfortable like this hat. It might not fit, but it's really about choosing between right and wrong, good and evil, justice and prejudice. And it's time for everyone listening to put your hat on and pick a side. When you really want to ask that Black or brown faculty member or friend what to do, instead of Googling or picking up a book, will you put on the hat? When a minority faculty member tells you what happened to them and you have an opportunity to support them, will you put on the hat? When someone in your department undermines a colleague of color's credibility or criticizes them, will you put on the hat? When you want to touch a person of color's hair or comment how your tan makes you as dark as them, or say you don't see color, will you put the hat on? When it's time to change your curriculum, to add content for disparities, will you put the hat on? When an email comes from a person of color that looks for demographic data by race, or to join a research project, or to be a mentor, will you put the hat on? When you have a chance to weaponize your words on evaluations of faculty of color, or use your tears to threaten and terrorize, will you put on the hat? When it comes to cast your vote, will you vote for humanity or hate, hell or healing? What hat will you wear? And as I mentioned earlier, bigotry, all of those things, elitism, inequality, microaggressions, they all come from a racist tree with roots in every institution, in every department, every division, every person, including me. So after you've made your choice and you've leaned into the discomfort of your failures, you've reignited your faith and believed people of color without defending or deflecting. When you commit to fidelity that must be the foundation of a future for all peoples, Black, brown, white, or otherwise. When you put the hat on, the next question that I want you to answer for the Duke School of Medicine, for the nation and for the world, and for Chloe, the next question is, will you leave it on? Thank you.
Kenny, next time you can have an hour. I could listen for a long time. You had so much to teach us. 4 extraordinary leaders, but the hard work cannot be done by them. It must be done by us. That is a burden that we all have to do the heavy lifting. And so while I appreciate all of their efforts, I am committing my efforts and our efforts to really move the needle. So going forward, first of all, there are a couple of programs that can inform us, and we can use these programs not to celebrate that, hey, we've got this, but more to learn, to create opportunities and to learn from them. So I want to talk about a few of those programs. First is the Teaching for Equity Fellowship. This is a program that most directly addresses racism. It's housed in the Duke Human Rights Center and the Franklin Humanities Institute. And the structure is purposeful and intended for the fellows to effectively engage in the course materials without having the burden of worrying about the repercussions. And so it's actually removed from the campus. And we've had 40 faculty members so far participate in that training program, but I would pose that we need a lot more to participate. Then there's the CTSA, CTSI. Ebony has been an amazing leader in that institute. But what she's done recently is really start asking the same questions I'm asking of the whole school, she's asking of our clinical research mission. So she's created an Equity and Dismantling Racism Leadership Council, really wants to dissect down to all of our processes, whether it's identifying people for studies or how we engage our study participants to ask the same question. Are we really fair and equitable in how we approach individuals for studies? And how do we avoid racism in the very core processes that we are using to reach out to our patients for clinical trials? So a lot of great work going on in CTSI. When we look at how do we create an environment where we really do have the infrastructure for health equities research, I use Kim Johnson's program as a wonderful example. This is an NIH-funded program that's a Center for Research to Advance Healthcare Equity. It's not only important in the studies they're doing, but one of the goals is to really teach our faculty and our trainees how to do this important research. And then it's our curriculum. As I mentioned, Kenny was the force behind our Cultural Determinants of Health and Healthcare Disparities course. It's in I believe, its third year. Now we are really looking at ways to incorporate these core concepts and principles into the clerkship years. And it has been a terrific success. But as aptly said to me by a student recently, these kind of concepts shouldn't only be in a single course. They should really be a part of our entire curriculum. And then how do we create an environment that really nurtures the career of our faculty, particularly our underrepresented faculty? And this is a program that was started, I think we're probably in the third or fourth year now. Kevin Thomas, he did the research behind it to really figure out what our faculty needed, stood up the program. I think he's in his third or fourth class now. But this is showing some really terrific signs of success. It clearly has created a community for our underrepresented faculty where they feel they have a home, they have mentors, and a safe environment to really discuss the challenges of succeeding at a place like Duke. And we've gotten great feedback so far. And then I want to highlight the Ideals Office that Jana talked about. Again, this is an example of setting up a program that starts to provide a community and resources for our underrepresented trainees, and setting new policies and procedures to address discrimination, bias, and harassment, and maximizing resources for the faculty and students, and increasing accountability for our faculty. So those programs give us some guide, but we have a lot to do. So I want to start talking about a way forward. We are seizing the moment to make a renewed and reinvigorated commitment to address institutional racism, to build processes and cultures that support our stated values of diversity and inclusion, and to contribute meaningfully to addressing the problems of racial and social injustice. These efforts will look across all of our missions to improve the diversity of our workforce, to educate current and future health professionals about the impact of racism and inequity on health disparities and health outcomes, enhance our ability to mentor students, trainees, junior faculty, and staff to become future leaders, enhance our research efforts to advance knowledge of interventions that reduce racial and ethnic disparities, serve our diverse patient population, as we know quality care is culturally competent care, and to move from a school that rejects racism to a school that is actively anti-racist. So, how are we doing that? We're using a framework that Rhonda Brandon has outlined for all of Duke Health. So that includes the health system, the School of Medicine, and School of Nursing. And we're all in the first phase, which is really listening, and listening in a very different way. And we don't want to stop that. That's really important. And as Rhonda so simply told everybody during the town hall yesterday, it's really following ABCs, acknowledging the pain that many in our community are feeling, being really centered on listening without distraction, and do so with compassion and empathy. There's also a lot of other material that I encourage you to either listen to or read, and a lot of that is up on our website in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. This is a learning journey for many of us. But we need to move listening and learning to active planning and action. So what I'm proposing is what we do in our core missions, whether it's clinical or it's research or it's education, we do an intensive strategic evaluation and planning. And that sets our goals and sets our benchmarks. And we hold ourselves accountable for that. Our action here needs to have the similar level of intensity, focus, and accountability. So we're planning to launch a strategic planning process. As I said, it will be rigorous, it will be inclusive, engaging diverse constituents, and most importantly, it will articulate how we hold ourselves accountable going forward. Now, we have many questions and issues that we've already started to articulate as we enter into the planning process. What's the optimum organization and structure around the diversity, inclusion, equity? How do we listen better to all members of our community on an ongoing basis? What structural barriers exist in our environment that impede recruitment, retention, and inclusion of a diverse community? How do we provide mentorship and support the career development and career satisfaction for underrepresented students, trainees, and faculty? How do we continue to build a diverse pipeline of faculty, students, and staff? How do we transform our education curriculum to incorporate principles of cultural humility, cultural awareness, health equity, and disparities throughout? What education and leadership development is required to create a culture that prioritizes diversity, inclusion, equity? And as I mentioned, how do we hold our leaders accountable? What metrics are we going to follow? So we do have a lot of work to do. As I said, we are going to really approach it the same way we approach any rigorous planning around our missions, but there are some tangible next steps. First of all, the listening will be ongoing, and that will provide us certainly more opportunities to learn. We are already forming a special med ed commission on anti-racism, and this is because the students have already given us a lot of things to work on that, number one, can't wait, and number two, they are, I would say, regretless actions going forward. And that work will be incorporated in our strategic plan. But coming out of the strategic plan, we know there are going to be a lot of other tangible steps, and I've outlined them here as well. And in closing, I want to let you know that the last 2 weeks, I have been listening in a way that I believe I've never allowed myself to listen before. And I thank the students for that. As a mother, I saw in them the disappointment and grief that mothers never want to see in their own children. And I listened. While I've always been taken pride in rejecting racism and embracing the premise that diversity is excellence, the move from espousing those lofty and important values to being an intentional anti-racist leader is what is new for me. I will embrace this role not only because I believe that a place like Duke can and should evolve, but because I believe it is the absolute right thing to do, and I cannot think of a more important focus. So now I want to thank all those that helped me think this through the last couple of weeks. Certainly the Office of Diversity and Inclusion under the leadership of Judy Seidenstein and her team, a number of faculty members that advised me, Nadine Barrett, Ebony Bulwer, Kevin Thomas, and Kenny Rayleigh, the School of Medicine Diversity and Inclusion Council General Body, the Ideals Office under Jonna Fryerson's leadership, and the Multicultural Resource Center with Maureen Collins, Del Whitfall, and Sharon Coward, and the SNMA leaders and members. I want to thank this 37 School of Medicine Diversity and Inclusion delegates, and especially recognize the leaders of the Student Advisory Council on Diversity and Inclusion. These 4 leaders have the courage, clarity to come forward, clearly express their pain, and have turned it into action items that they've given us. So I thank them so much for being willing to share those with me. And with that, I think we all need to roll up our sleeves and move forward. Thank you all.